My name is Michael Bullington. I am one of the organizers for HackPSU of the tech team. Today, I'm going to show you a little bit about Flutter. There's a lot to cover, but I'm going to at least try to explain what it is, where you should go to get set up with it, why you would want to use it, and after that, kind of break in a little more where the tutorial may stop. And so, as you can see, we're at the Flutter website. It's flutter.dev. And why would you want to use Flutter? So Flutter is an alternative to, say, traditional app building for phones. So like on Android, you have Android Studio and that process where you'd use Java. On iOS, you have, like, you can write in Swift or Objective-C. And this Flutter allows for you to create one app that works both places using a language named Dart, which is kind of similar to JavaScript or C#. So or Java. So if you're in that realm, that's great. I'm not going to cover much the Dart syntax outside of what we go through in the tutorial. However, if you have like a general background on programming languages, like I said, JavaScript, C#, Java, if you know one of those, that's great. I'm going to leave that out of this. And so on the website, it basically says part of what I just told you, that you can build applications for mobile, web, and desktop from a single code base. And so one of the great things about Flutter and why I chose to talk to you about it today is I think it's very fast, which is great compared to like other solutions for this. And also it can look very native while retaining that speed. And so as we'll see, like, you can make it look like material design on Android. You can make it look like an iOS app. The possibilities there are really endless and well designed. So this next part, so I'm going to click on Get Started, and then for your operating system, you're going to want to follow whichever guide best suits you. And so, like, I have a Mac. Here is the Mac guide. I want you to go through that yourself. So if you'd like to pause that now, read this whole thing, do this whole thing, and come back, that's great. And then you'll also want to be setting up your editor. So in this next part, I use Visual Studio Code. I'm sure that's very familiar to many of you. If it's not, essentially it's a free code editor from Microsoft. You can go to this link, download it, and then follow the guide to install the plugin. So if you'd like to do that now, you can also pause and come back. So once you have all of that completed, you should be able to go into your terminal. So if you're not familiar with the command line, this is pretty basic command. All you really need to know is the cd command, and then our new command, which is Flutter. And so if you set it up correctly, you'll be able to see Flutter Manager, Flutter Application Development, Common Commands, and then all of the help. So we can create a new project with Flutter, create, and then to-do list here. So as you can see, I've already done this. I'm just walking through how I did that. So as you can see right here, Flutter create to-do list, and then there's a list of all sorts of stuff. And so now, so it's for desktop and mobile and web. We're primarily going to be focusing on the mobile and the desktop here. The mobile is what's configured by default. If you'd like to get it working on desktop, you need to Google a little bit for that, but it is working, and that's what I'm going to use today just for simplicity. So it doesn't matter where you're running this, just do Flutter run. So if you have Android Studio set up with your Android phone, it should recognize that automatically. If you have Xcode installed and you have your iPhone or iPad hooked up, it should recognize that automatically. And you can test this with Flutter devices. So everything we do will have this Flutter command in front of it. So see, I've set up the desktop, like I mentioned, and so there. We have our connected device. and then let's run the sample app. And so I've coded none of this so far. This is entirely what they give you out of the box when you type in create. Okay, so here's our Mac application. So it's the Flutter demo homepage, and then you click this increment, and it keeps incrementing. Yeah, I guess it's pretty basic, as you might have guessed from the little hints everywhere. What I want to do with this video and what I want to take you through is converting this from a counter to a to-do list. And so our features for our to-do list, what do we want? For our to-do list, what we would want is 1, ability to view items. 2, ability to add items. 3, ability to delete items. 4, have items persist across runs. Bonus. So the number 4 is essentially like if you have the app open on your phone and you put all the stuff in your to-do list, you want all of that to go away as soon as you close out the app, right? So if we have time, we're going to get into that.
So now we are in Visual Studio Code. All I did was I started the application, and then I opened the folder that we just generated with Flutter Create. So here is our main application. In Flutter, the main file that we're going to want to look at is in the lib folder, and then inside that main.dart. So like I said, this is a Dart file. If you have the plugins installed properly for VS Code, you should see Dart down here. That makes it colorful. When you highlight things, that's what gives you like help in the IntelliSense. So we really want that. So if that's not something that's currently in your editor, please pause it right now and like kind of investigate that, because that's going to be really critical going forward. So as you can see, on the left is our editor, on the right is our program. So we just Flutter ran this, Flutter run to be more precise, and here's like a little cheat sheet for commands. So we will primarily be using these in a little bit. I'll introduce you to them one at a time. And so, like I said, here's our code. We want to start by making a little change, right? So before we go in and like completely rip this up to make our to-do list, and before we start on the first one, the ability to view items, we're going to want to like kind of figure out how Flutter works. So for a to-do list, something easy is right here where you see Flutter demo homepage. That really won't work. So let's change that to awesome HackPSU to-do list. Okay, so now we've changed it in our source code. How can we change it over here? So if you were doing traditional iOS or Android development, a lot of times you would just have to restart your entire application. And nobody really wants to do that. That takes multiple minutes. And so in Flutter, you can do that, but there's really no reason to. Most of the time, this use case will be covered by the hot reload. And as you can see, there's some emoji emphasis. They really are confident in this feature. So if we just press lowercase r, nothing else, it updates. And so as we can see, reloaded 1 of 499 libraries in our terminal. And over here, awesome HackPSU to-do list. So we can keep going with this. This works for just about everything. So colors.amber, that sounds like a color. R again, it is now amber. And so as you can see, warnings are printed to the console. I'm not sure what that is. We're not going to worry about it because it's just a warning. It's not an error. And so you can take a look at that on your own if you choose. So now that we know how to change little things, I think we should progress into larger things. How do widgets work in Flutter? So if you are coming from a web background, then these widgets are very similar to React. If you know React or have any experience with like how to think about React, then that will help a lot. You'll feel right at home here. And so Flutter widgets are more widgets in air quotes than actual elements on your screen. So like the material app is a widget, theme data is a widget, homepage is a widget, my app is a widget that we've created, and my homepage is another widget that we've created. And so each widget has a build method here. So it takes the context and it returns more widgets. So widgets are made of widgets, which are made of more widgets. And so you can really compose those. And here, like I said, it's not as much, we're not instating the actual material app widget. And you can see the source code for it here. And it's another widget. We're actually kind of defining a template for our application. So if we wanted to say like, if some condition, this is bad syntax, don't copy this, then we could also return null for nothing if we didn't want anything to be displayed there. We could return something else. And because it's a template, it will just, it'll run with it. So that offers a lot of flexibility there. And there are two main types of widgets that we need to be concerned about. There are the stateless widgets and the stateful widgets. And so, as you can see here, the example has both of them. The widget that is stateless does not, like as the name applies, it does not have any state outside of more widgets. And so nothing about this is persistent. Not across app reinstalls, that's not what reinstalls, that's not what I mean by persistent, but like if build was to be called again, no data would be saved from the previous build, right? And so for our counter here, that doesn't work because we need to store the state of this number. But in the sense of like the app, the theme, the homepage, these things are all constant. They're not changing. And so using a stateless widget there can provide a lot of performance benefits. And then for this section, like the 35, the counter, we also have a stateful widget. And so a stateful widget, if you look, is actually just another type of widget. It uses the same structure as a stateless widget, except there's no build. Where is the build? And so as you can see, the build is not here. The build is actually down here in our state. And so I'd highly recommend you read all of these comments. Like they're really great, and I think they're going to provide a lot of benefit. However, the build here uses this counter, right? And so in our stateful widget, which is actually a stateless widget with more stuff, it will create a state where all of this is the same as before. It is not persisted. However, this counter is. And then we can trigger a re-render of this by using setState, almost exactly the same as React in that aspect. So here we'll want to move a little bit more. I think we're going to change that back to like a orange, like a HackPSU color, but not like the blue. Okay, so as you can see, it changed to orange. And then my homepage, that looks good. How are we going to add our to-do list items? Because as you know, that's the ability to view items. That's our first section, right? So what we should do is we want this to be persisted, right? That's the first question you should ask. Does this data need to be stored, or can this data be created, thrown out, created, thrown out? And in our case, it's the first one. So let's just like create a list string and then like list items. And then, so this is the list syntax in Dart. This little underscore here essentially means private. And so if you're coming from Java, that would be the same as like private. However, private doesn't work in Dart. You use the underscore. So item 1, item 2, item 3. And then let's get rid of this for now. So here we have our scaffold. I'm just going to, here we have our app bar, all of this stuff. So I'm just going to get rid of our floating action button since we're not going to be using that, at least right now. We'll add it back. And then I'm going to get rid of our body as well. So now we want to present a list. And here is where one of the other things I really enjoy about Flutter comes in, which is the documentation. And so there's totally no shame at looking at the API docs. I'm going to do it right now. Now we are here at the api.flutter.dev that we talked about earlier. So you see this has its own guide here for importing libraries, framework libraries, Dart libraries. I highly recommend you read this. Like I said, there's so much to Flutter. There's really a lot here, more than we can cover in this video. So I'm going to try my best to include all of this in the description, and you should really go check it out. So first we want our list view, right? Our actual widget that will contain each individual item. So we click on list view, and here we have even more documentation. So there's a Flutter widget of the week series, and this one's obviously for list view. I will link this in the description as well. I highly recommend you go check these out. They're from the official Flutter team, and honestly they do a wonderful job at this. So as you can see, here's some like basic examples. Here is the first one. So see, we have our list view children. So this is like an optional parameter in Dart. And then our children is a list of more widgets. So that's great and all. And as you can see, they have like a container with the height and stuff like that. But we don't want our items to look like that. We want our items to look like material design. So how do we do that? Flutter has a great built-in library. So there's actually two. One is called material. It's somewhere. Normally the material widgets actually don't have material in front of them. So like if you see like list tiles, the one we're going to go to next, is actually a material list tile. And so like if you go out to the front, import Flutter material. And then there's also the Cupertino widgets. So we can go to here. If you're looking for a more iOS feel, I implore you to look more into this. The Cupertino library has a lot of elements that make it look like iOS. Cupertino is the city in California where the Apple headquarters is. They don't have an official name for their design, so Cupertino it is. And so let's go to our list tile. As you can see, it says list tile class from material, and the from material is very important. So we click on it. There's another Flutter widget of the week video. I think there's a lot of these actually. Like I said, they're a really great resource. And then down below, it's basically what we expect. We have our list tile widget, the title, and then if you noticed here and before with our other title for the whole application, all text in your application has to be wrapped with this text widget. And so this is just another widget. This is just another widget. Essentially, the goal of explaining this is everything in Flutter more or less is a widget. And so we're going to go back to here. We have our empty body, and then we have list view. And then we're going to specify the children and fill this out. Okay, so here we have a key. So since the list items could change in the future, the key is just an optimization thing. In React, if you specify a key there, it's the same concept. And then title, text item, we have to remember that. And then here's the syntax error, right? So what's wrong? It says the argument type iterable list tile cannot be assigned to the parameter type list widget. So whenever you do a map operation, like any array functional method, it does not actually return a list again. It returns an iterator, which is a performance thing. But like in this case, at the end of this, we'll have to do dot to list. And so if you're running into an issue like that in Flutter, that can be really common, and hopefully that will help you to get past it. So now we've saved. You see we have our list view and our tiles. Let's go, hit R, see what happens. And so here we are. As you can see, since we're on Mac OS, it has this rubber band effect, just like iOS. Android can do that too. That's part of the power of Flutter. It's all up to you. And then item 1, item 2, item 3, just like we specified here. So I'm going to call that a success for number 1, the ability to view items. So let's go on to number 2, the ability to add items. Okay, go back to everything. Here's where we would want our floating action button. And then another widget named floating action button. As you can see, there's a parameter that's required named onPressed. So we're going to do on add item. Put that out here. And so this will be persisted as well. So that's a performance thing. And then icon. So this is where it's named child. This is where the IntelliSense really comes in play. So that's why it was so critical we had it earlier. So we want an icon widget, and then icons add. Okay, as you can see, our button is back. And so we can put an accessibility label on this as well. We're going to label, I think we need to do tooltip. Sure, so message. And then child. So add item to awesome to do list. We're going to format that really quick. Add item to awesome to do list when I hover over it. So that's great and all. Right now, if we click on this, it does nothing. So now we want to go back to our documentation because we want to accept a text input, right? We want them to be able to enter their item. So now I've pulled up alert dialog, which is essentially what we want here. See, so we have our dialog, there's an approve, but that's customizable. We'll want the user to submit text into this form and then hit add, right? And so here is the code that goes along with the sample. Essentially, this is what we want to fill out in here. So on add item, we want to show dialog. Dialog void. Actually, we want a string in this scenario because this will eventually return whatever it is. So whatever it is supplied to this pop method will end up returning from here. And that's a future. It's the same thing as promises in JavaScript. So I'm going to make this async future void final string equals await show dialog. Okay, so we need a context, right? So there's context down here. What do we do to get a context here? Well, it actually just works. So since we are in a state, this doesn't work in state list widgets, but in our state we can just access content whenever, or context whenever. So then builder, the builder is essentially another build method. And then, so we're going to do build text input. So then widget, build text input, build context. So now we can follow what's on the left here. Alert dialog. I don't think we need a title. Content, we'll come to that in a minute. And then actions, widget. Again, I'm still just copying from here. Nothing out of the ordinary. Flat button, child, text, add, on pressed, navigator, of, and then we have to pass our context, and then pop. And so see here where it says result, that's what string will end up being. So we'll get to this in a second to do. So now we have to build our actual text input. I want to go to the documentation for that. Text field. Alright, so see we have Cupertino text field, material text field. And so we're going to use the material one. So what we need is down here where there's the text editing controller. This is a form of state, so you can only use a text field in a state connected to a stateful widget. And this makes sense, right? Because when you enter in like your title, or in our case the name of our to-do, like that needs to be available and persist when you type in letters. So text editing controller, and then see here it says int state, so we want to just copy that. And so int state is ran on the first time, so it's like a constructor, but it's also a not. So okay, now we can do content, text, field, controller, then yeah, that's really all we need. So what we want to do here is navigate pop, controller, value, choose string. So I believe that'll work. We will try that in real time. So if string equals null, return, just return. So this will happen in some cases where we would pop without providing a string, or later we could have like a cancel. So that's what this is about, just future proofing for that. So now we have our string and we want to set our state. So inside of the set state, this function here that's very important, we do list items add string. Okay, so I think it is now time we can test this out. Okay, and you can, in the future, you can add like little hints and stuff here. We'll just, so test 1, 2, 3, 4. And as you see, because of the state here, whenever we typed in test 1, 2, 3, 4, that is persisting. So click add, and so here is what an error looks like in Flutter. So it says exception caught by gesture. The getter value was called on null. So what is the problem here? How do we resolve this? We can try going up here. And the first thing I like to do is try a hot restart. And so sometimes with state, when a reload works, a reload works, but then sometimes if you mess with state, you have to restart. And this also does not take minutes, which is great. So just uppercase R, nothing else. We've hot restarted it. Now let's try it again. Okay, great. And so obviously this is not what we want. However, it appears that the error is in this value here. So as you can see, it says text 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So dot text. Great. Now we're going to restart that to not make the same mistake. Test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And there you go. We're able to do the second thing on our list, the ability to add items along with the first one. So now we can delete items actually really easily in the same way. So down here in our list tile, we'll want to add a trash can to the right. So where it says trailing, that will display after the title over here. We want an icon button, icon, trash. Is that not what the... Oh, okay, I switched the two. And on press, on delete. And so the reason we're not declaring the entire thing here is because we need access to this item. And so on delete of item, on delete up here, string item. Okay, that looks good. Let's refresh. And now we have a bunch of trash cans. So something needs to be happening with these. We can set state just like before. Set state. And then up here, list items, remove item. Okay, so now try that. We can delete, we can add. So that is our first three, the ability to view items, add items, and delete items. And then have items persist across runs. As a bonus, I will introduce you to a library that you can use to do this. There's many different options, and Flutter is an experimental area where the options for this are expanding daily. So they're called state management solutions. And one of the ones that I like is named Hive, db.dev. So hivedb.dev. And so essentially what this is it's, if you're familiar with like SQL or like SQLite or something like that, it can do similar things, but it's ultimately a lot simpler, and there's a lot of use cases where you don't need something like SQL, but you can easily add this to your project. There's the quick start here, and so there's boxes. And so I will link this in the description as well. I think Hive is a very great resource, and if you want to persist your data, that's a good place to look along with the provider library. So I will link this as well. This is, you can read the description. It's very useful. So I think that's all. So we've done the first three, the ability to view items, add and delete, and then have items persist across runs as a bonus. That will also be in the description. All of this code will be on GitHub, so you can take a look at it if you'd like, try to figure out like what the differences are between my code, your code, and I've really enjoyed doing this. If there's a lot of demand for this, I'll do like a part 2, whatever the viewers of this video are interested in. So Thanks for your time.